Hello everyone, this is a in-depth look at the new override system for those who really want to get in there and customize their AI crews. We're going to be going over a couple of the principles we used when creating the default set and sort of some of the thoughts behind the overrides we used. And hopefully that'll help explain a little bit about how they work and how they can be used. So we'll go ahead and add we'll add all the bots. And we can take a look. So I guess here's a very, very simple one. Just to start off with, this is the close to captain priority. When active, it will cause the AI to move and stay close to the captain, as you might expect.
Or at least increase the priority to do so.
Yeah, but when it is the active one, it will do that. So here we're editing the priority, and then the one with the highest priority is selected. That's the sort of basic gist of the AI priority system. These overrides allow you to change and manipulate these things based on conditions going on in the game. For example, if we sort of read out what this one's doing, the logic behind this one right now is that we go top down. If stay close to captain, this is actually referencing the captain's order, stay close to captain. I can demonstrate that by opening up the order screen and issuing a stay close to captain order.
Is the mouse visible?
It is. Now you can see the crew is trying to stay next to me. This is because the priority of close to captain was raised to 3 due to our override here. You can see now the override's active. If I were to change the order back to at ease, the override would no longer be active and it would go back to the base priority. So these are handled in top-down order.
I think a good piece of advice is also if it's grayed out, that means it's currently false. If it's simply white, that means it's true, but it wasn't chosen. And if it's white and blinking, that's the one that it's currently choosing.
Yep. You can also follow this little line. It's just it'll tell you which one's currently being chosen as the active override. In this situation, it's actually sort of an inverse override. We're actually setting the override to 0 when the bot in this situation is not on a planet surface. This is because defend self we've split up into planet and ship to allow a bit more precise control when placing these overrides. Technically, they actually do the same action, so you can actually swap them if you wanted to. They're literally just additional bucket for you to place overrides in to allow a bit more complex behaviors when dealing with the defend self priority. We can see here man turret has no overrides, so it's just selecting the base priority. We can go ahead and show off, I guess, adding a new priority.
Yeah, perhaps as a captain, we want the offensive attack order to really push the weapon spot into man turret.
Sure, so that's a very easy one. I go up here, select man turret, as I've already done, and then I would hit this new button to create a new override. By default, these are placed at the bottom of any overrides. There aren't any overrides right now, so it'll just appear above the base priority. We hit that, and we get this menu full of all these buttons that we can press.
Yeah.
And each of these are all the different types of overrides you can add. So in your situation, George, you wanted, when the captain issues an offensive attack order, to raise the priority of man turret for this bot. We're adding the weapon bot right now. To do that, we'll just select an override for offensive attack. Currently, that's not the current order, so you can see it's grayed out. And even if it were the current order, it would still just be 2 priority, which actually wouldn't change anything. We can set it to 4, which would change the priority of man turret to 4 if the offensive attack order was active, which we can demonstrate by switching the order, going back. We can now see that offensive attack is now being selected. We can now show off a little bit of the principle of the order of the priorities as having an impact on the actual behavior. So we can set up an inverse priority for at ease. This is a situation where two overrides are actually active. In that situation, it will always pick the topmost override. In this situation, it's picking not at ease, which is true because we are in an offensive attack order. Sorry if that's confusing.
Yeah, maybe a better way to explain it would be at ease is a captain's order. Not at ease is anything that's not at ease. It's like encompassing virtually every other type of event or order.
Yeah. So it's true in the situation and being selected. We can also see here, because both are true, the order, the actual top-down, the sorting order of this list is actually determining what's going on. If I were to switch this, I click this button to raise its position in this list, now the priority is actually changed to 4 because it is above it and then being selected. So again, and this is an important principle, is it will pick the top one in that list.
The first one that's true.
The first one that's true, yes. And again, it's not related at all to the actual priority setting here. It's just related to the order. So we can try adding another one here. This one allows you to edit some more information about it. In this situation, we're actually editing the percentage that is being used by this override. If we change this to 105%, becomes true because our hull is at 100% right now. If we change it to 100, since the hull is not less than 100% right now, it is not selecting that order. So again, these are additional ways to sort of customize your overrides to enable more specific behavior. And just like any override, you can invert it. So that's sort of the basics of overrides. We can go over some of the sub-priorities here. Let's go to the pilot bot.
Actually, this is a good thing to mention. Go back to main priorities. You see fly ship is currently active, but that's a pretty complex priority. There's a lot going on behind fly ship. So you can see that right next to it, there's a class-specific icon, just the word, a label, better to say, which means that under the class-specific tab, there's way more information. We figured it's important to show all the detail, but it's also important to show it in the main priorities because it's also being filtered among those.
Correct. So this main priority is being shown twice, although you don't get all the sub-priorities unless you go to the specific menu for it. The way sub-priorities work can vary slightly depending on their root priority. In the situation of most, and in this one, the main priority will look at the active sub-priority, which in this case is aggressive. You can see the sub-priorities are being sort of treated like main priorities, but just inside of another priority. Fly ship will be active at this point, but then once it's active, it will go, hey, what's my topmost sub-priority, which in this case is aggressive. So in this situation, it's actually the fly ship priority will change its behavior to be aggressive. This allows you to control sub behaviors and sort of enable you to almost create more priorities with one. This is called sort of a bucket system in AI speak, but we think it fits the game fairly well and is fairly easy to understand, and I think it just kind of works well with the setup we have. So hopefully that makes some sense. We have a somewhat complicated one here. And it also explains a little bit about the philosophy that we used when creating the default overrides. In this situation, it's a totally additive override system mean the base priority is 0, which means by default this thing will never be active. And the overrides are being used to activate it. Additionally, you can create subtractive overrides where the base priority has a value or is high, and then the overrides null it out. This one kind of has both, because if the hull is less than 60, it will have an override or an importance level 0. Always. And since it's the first one, that will override everything else and disable the aggressive behavior when the hull is less than 60%.
Sorry, continue.
Of course, that number is editable too, so a captain can come here and customize this quite easily. So, but you were saying something, George?
Yeah, just to, so we don't forget, something to keep in mind is when you set these priorities, you click on them, but in order to get 0, you have to click on 1 and then click on it again to actually get 0.
Correct. 0 is sometimes has special uses, so just keep that in mind. It typically will totally disable the behavior if possible. So, yeah. So, as it might be obvious, you can also use this button to delete overrides, these buttons to reorganize, and these buttons to edit. This is the invert. Just as a quick overview. So we can explain some of these. Some of these you might see have sort of very specific overrides. This one is quite simple. Just base priority 0 means typically it's not active unless there's a black hole in sector, in which becomes has an importance factor of 5. I suppose it's a good moment to quickly go over how we used importance factors. So because the importance factors are put into the priority list and then sorted, all that matters is the relative importance, which means you can sort of treat these importance values, such as like 3, 4, and 5, however you want, and as long as it's the top one, it'll be selected. We were very careful not to use 5 a lot, or 4. We find it's best to try to keep it as low as possible, allowing you to use those higher level priorities as stronger overrides to really get what you want. 5 is typically a life or death situation where it's like, you do this now or else, there's typically no other valid choice at that moment. It's, life or death critical, do it right now. 4 is sort of the highest we'd use for normal stuff, and that was really, that was considered quite high in the priority list, and then we tried to keep it a bit lower. We could probably even move the whole thing a little bit lower than it is right now and get more control in those areas. So it's something we might do in the future, and of course you're free to do it yourself with your AI priorities, of course. But that's how we used it. And again, this system offers a lot of customization, and is actually quite easy to even totally break if you don't test it and think about it as you're doing it. We've really exposed a lot of the AI here, meaning you have a lot of control to make it both do what you want, but also that control can quite easily turn into the AI doing weird stuff or acting not how you want. We recommend opening up the AI priorities menu at this if the AI isn't acting how you think it should, and viewing what it's doing right now. Go to the main priority system, for example, and you can very clearly tell what it's doing in the situation. It's attempting to fly the ship, and it will also tell you why it's doing that. So whether it's a base priority or an override. So it's something to keep in mind that we did try to build this AI priority menu as both a creation tool and a sort of debug visualization tool as well. And in fact, there's very little innate AI hard-coded intelligence now, meaning these overrides really do control the AI almost directly. And the default overrides we're sending out are, in a way, our AI system implementation Now,
Yeah.
you can change it, you can break it, you can customize it in many, many ways. We've made this system very, very flexible. And we think that will enable people who spend the time and effort and really get in there to create really new stuff. And we're really excited about that. And yeah, we're excited, and hopefully some people do that. But at the same time, it's important to keep in mind that the system is very powerful, and with great power comes
Yeah.
the responsibility not to break it. So just something to keep in mind. If you leave it just how it is, we've tried to come up with a default set that acts fairly good. So you shouldn't have to, hopefully, edit it too much.
But it's there if you want to.
Yeah.
I say before we leave, let's go over behavior tweaks real quick and maybe create a custom order to show how that works.
Sure. Behavior tweaks are unsorted priorities. These are typically just bits of data that other priorities will read and use to just slightly tweak how they behave. Right now, we actually don't have a lot of it. We've sort of transitioned some of our old behavior tweaks into actual priorities or sub-priorities. Some classes have more than others, of course. For example, the SciBot will select the shield modulation or shield static setting depending on the relative priority of each of these behavior tweaks, meaning the one with the higher one of these two. In this case, static shields will be selected. This allows you to even control how the scientists set shields. You can also have them use programs more or less and use viruses more or less. So these things just sort of apply across the board, and they aren't necessarily sorted, although as you saw with the shields, it's sort of the exception where although they aren't sorted in the menu here, the relative priorities of those does matter, and we'll select the one with the higher importance. We'll probably be adding and tweaking some of these things, of course, but yeah. So I guess we can create a custom captain order,
Yeah.
which is actually a new feature in itself. To do that, I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna hit captain, and here I can type the text for my custom orders, and it could be anything you want. And by default, they don't attach to anything. They'll show up for other players, but of course the bots won't necessarily respond to them unless you set up overrides. So what's a interesting custom order that you think would be fun?
I always thought the idea of like a retreat function could be really nice.
The retreat?
Yeah, that sort of encompasses a lot of different actions potentially.
Sure, we can create a retreat, and if you want to let me know what you want the AI to do in that situation, we can kind of go over one by one and do it. So I suppose for the Pi bot, you
probably want them to fly sort of defensive status, yeah. Defensively, yeah.
Yeah, defensive will tend to will keep its distance a bit more than aggressive. So yeah, that should be good. You can also use avoid detection, which will attempt to get away from ships as well. But that one will not be very quick at it. It will tend to use less power. So we'll go ahead and do defensive. So I'll hit the create new override button. And then I'll select here. You see retreat under captain's orders here. And it shows you C1 there, which just means custom one. I'll select this. And now we have an override that responds to that specific captain's order. We can increase its priority here and bump it up to 4 or 5. Typically for captain's orders, you do want the AI to respond fairly often, so you want a pretty high importance for that. So yeah, that's sort of that's a basic setup for the Pi bot. We can also even edit like some specific program priorities. Typically, this will roughly modify the situations in which the AI will select these programs. The higher priority, the more often and more likely they'll run that specific program. So what we can do is, if the captain's order is currently retreat, we can greatly boost up the value of that program priority. So these aren't necessarily sorted with everything else, so you can put 4 or 5s in without worrying about it affecting other priorities. These aren't main priorities. So in this situation, you've told the AI that you want, if a retreat order is active, that thrust booster is a really good program to run. Emergency shield boosting potentially could be too, but we'll just leave it as thrust booster for the moment.
We can also go to the behavior tweaks and just have it more likely to execute programs.
We can do that. Let's just add the override and select your new priority for that situation. We'll put it to 4, which is pretty high. We can also go to the engineer box, and this bot has some pretty interesting behavior tweaks which you can use to actually modify the power levels of your individual systems. There's actually a totally new thing that the engineer bot was not capable of before. It just let the players edit the specific system priorities, and then it just would modify the total output accordingly to keep the reactor from overheating or etc. Now we can actually assign priorities to the individual power levels. In our example here, retreat, we probably want engineering to have a high priority. Is that right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Go ahead and add it and bump it up. We can totally max it out if we want. And this would go ahead and tell the engineer bot that if that order is active, boost up those engineering, boost up those thrusters. So that's pretty cool.
We can also take out weapons and science.
Totally.
Since when you're retreating, those aren't as high of a priority, or at all.
we can do that. Yeah, if you're retreating, don't necessarily need to go detect new ships, so we can totally null them out if we wanted to. And if we're retreating, I suppose maybe we want some extra shields. So this way you're sort of setting up almost like this sequence, this sort of order for all your AI to respond to at a certain moment. So we think this is really neat, and we hope people use it to create specific patterns or attacks that both could tell players what's up, and if they have AI bots, could even tell the AI bots what to do. So your AI bots can be part of the action and start responding to the battle situation, which we think is really neat. We hope people like that. So now we've created this retreat order, which boosts a bunch of various things. Do we want anything else? We could have the weapon bot missile targeting go ahead and target their engineering if we wanted to retreat. Just an idea. Again, this is all up to you guys. You guys get to make all your own stuff here. So could be kind of cool to have the weapon bot target their engineering, so that it gives us a higher chance of getting away when retreating. So just a quick example of a retreat. There's all sorts of other fun stuff too, of course, but yeah, we don't have to go over the name appearance stuff. I think that's fairly obvious how that works.
If you find yourself experimenting with the system and you think you've completely broken it or something, you can always go to save load and just reset to defaults. This will bring everything back to how it was when you started the game.
Correct.
And hopefully it gives you maybe a bit more more willing to maybe experiment with some strange ideas, knowing that you can always bring it back. Or you can always save whatever you currently have as a file, and then experiment with some new strange overrides to see if they're going in a direction you like. And if you don't, you can always load that save.
Totally. So yeah, I think that about covers the basics of the overrides and a quick explanation of some of our decisions. There's a lot in there. You can go ahead and peek and look into and see all the overrides we ended up putting in there. We'll almost certainly be making a few changes and tweaks. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoy it. Have fun making cool AI crews or playing with fun captain's orders and stuff. So thanks very much for watching.
Yeah, thank you guys very much. In the coming weeks, we may be adding more behaviors and priorities and overrides. So,
yep,
we'll see. Have a good one, guys.
Yep. See you guys.
Bye.